All right, welcome back to episode 6 of Startup Today's podcast, where we're now talking to Justin Maxwell from Qmark Solutions. Today is, I think, a very honest account of Justin. He's quite honest himself in his portrayals of himself, seeing him in other podcasts, but I'll let him do the storytelling. If you're not familiar with me, my name's Matt. I work with TechOn. We do offshoring of developers, more like a recruitment company helping them connect with talent abroad, and working remotely in your team, essentially as an extension of your team. But it's not about me today, it's about Justin. So, welcome, Justin. Do you want to do a quick intro and then we can get into the nitty gritty of today?
Beautiful. Yeah, thanks very much, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here and working with the guys from TechOn. My name's Justin Maxwell from Qmark Solutions. We founded Qmark Solutions in 2018 and has just slowly evolved over the time from a consulting business into a software dev house as well. And yeah, we're paddling our way through the stream as we go.
Sounds good. Before we get into it, what's one lesser known fact about Justin that people perhaps may not know so well?
Probably the funniest thing, and maybe not a lesser known fact, is that I get called Irish a lot.
Okay.
And I've never been to Ireland, but I am South African, and I think it's just the way I pronounce my R's. Ever since arriving in Australia, I have been thought of as an Irishman, which is very strange for me as someone who's never been to Ireland.
But
So
you sound nothing like a person from.
yes,
Okay.
I just believe that people who think I'm Irish have no idea what Irish people sound like, and that's just unfortunate for all the Irish people out there.
Okay. All right. Well, I think just to put a bit of context to this conversation, I first met you, I think it was like 2023, late, I want to say late or mid to late
Yeah.
2023, and it was most probably at a morning startup event. And I know we had a couple of chats just around tech and building MVPs and stuff. But so it's good to kind of finally have this chat and get from your point of view as well. Like, I guess I used to be a non-technical product manager back in my finance days, and did a lot of UAT, so I understand how to work with devs. I think from your point of view, it's even better and greater story and grander vision. So looking forward to getting all of that in today. So do you want to talk a bit more about kind of your backstory and, from a tech point of view? I know you've
Yeah.
been a solutions architect before. Like, let's just talk about a bit about your journey just to add a bit more, flavor.
Yeah, sure. So I think maybe we take it back a number of years, and I go
Sure.
almost back to the beginning, but I won't sit too long in the past.
Yep.
I was very fortunate. My dad has been in IT since I was born. So my dad was a developer, wrote some of the first ATM codes and credit card machine payment processing codes back in the day. As a 4-year-old, we had a 486 DX2, which I then started to learn computers, and I had funny little games on that. And this was long before the likes of Windows. So we were using a program called X-Tree Gold, which allowed me to then get used to and familiar with how to write commands in order to see things. I've always grown up in that sort of space. I studied computer science. I never qualified in computer science, but I studied Visual Basic, Delphi, all the old school programming languages, C, that sort of space when I was at university.
Mm.
And as I said, I never quite finished. So moving on from that, I actually fell out of IT for a long period of time and got tired of it. And that's where my love for business actually kicked in, because I started a company in signage, and we did graphic design, and it was a creative outlet, and we got the ability to deliver signage to organizations. And this was back in South Africa. We unfortunately had a bad business deal, and I lost that company to a business partner. fast forward a few years, I worked back in the IT space, worked as the account manager and customer relationship manager for a software company that did monitoring as a service. We looked after large organizations. I then started to really get an idea of, let's call it SaaS or as a service packages. So we were doing monitoring as a service in those sorts of days. And that really gave me that sort of idea of where things were kind of going. I've always been a bit of a lagger. I'm not going to lie. I've always been a bit of a lagger when it comes to technology. Okay. I'm never the first person to get the latest stuff. I'm always just cautious about it. Fast forwarding again, I immigrated to Australia and found myself working for an enterprise architecture company that did, it was a software development company that sold enterprise architecture applications. And that's where I really found my passion, because I think the ability to talk business and understand the technology side of things really helped me grow in that sort of space. And I had a lot of good education down on that route. We spent a lot of time understanding how enterprise architecture helped organizations map out their plans, their strategies, their moving forwards, how they should be aligning IT to business. And I spent a lot of time in that space and learning the best that I could to understand what that looked like. Then in 2018, as I mentioned, we separated from that organization. I moved back to Perth and started Qmark Solutions with two founders. So there were three of us in the beginning. Now, the other two people, one was a very well experienced information architect. The other was a business analyst. Then myself came in as the junior in this sort of space, in the architecture space, compared to these two veterans in the field.
Okay.
But what I brought to the table was the business side of things. From that perspective, we just wanted to be a consulting house. And this is where everybody was doing bums on seats consulting, get a client, get people on board, contract people in, do the work and complete those projects and maintain that. And that worked well until everybody knows COVID came along and pretty much everyone was told to work from home. Contractors were axed. We lost a lot of contracts in that sort of space. And I think that's where fundamentally things started to shift. I remember thinking back to the organization that I worked for that had the software product that was still generating revenue, even while everyone was working from home. And as I said in the beginning, I'm a bit of a lagger when it comes to technology. So it took me a long time to really uptake this. I started to draw out a few screens. I started to model out some ideas, and I never took action. Probably for another 2 years, I never actually pulled the trigger on it. I still did the consulting work. I still learned a little bit about what was going on in the market.
Right.
But I went in with more of an idea of what do people not like about the current architectural tools, rather than going in with how do we solve these problems? Where can we get this? I just started to find out what people didn't like about these tools. And I started to document my first requirements list based on that. And while putting all of this together, I met some people that wanted to have their own architecture tool. I had some naysayers, and everybody will say, if you're going to write a product, take $1 million, chuck it in the bin, set fire to it, and then start writing the product. And to a degree, I can believe that is possible, and I think a lot of people will feel that. And with the advancement of AI and technology and things, I think that narrative is heavily changing. And the thing that COVID, I think, gave everybody was the ability to work remotely. This digital nomad came about. The ability to offshore came about. People had a lot of good value coming out, and we had greater access to international markets from a development perspective, things as yourself. And if I talk a little bit about TechOn, from my perspective, not from yours, and I'm happy to be wrong, but that sort of opened up that market for companies like yourself to offer these services to other organizations. And I've seen that from South Africa. We see engineers doing engineering work for international organizations, but they live in South Africa and they're completely offshore engineers. So bringing us forward to today, I then reignited my idea to create a product. I met with a number of people. We try to work out a couple of ideas to get things going. We were going down different paths. It didn't always work. But we started to really knuckle down and develop that. And I think for my sins, I had to learn a few lessons along the way. And I'm happy to divulge all of that information as a non-technical and someone who hasn't been a developer for over 20 years, not really understanding what it takes to hire a developer and the learnings that I've gone through from all of that. I'm very happy to talk deeper into that if you want. And we can definitely explore that. And now where we are today, as you're aware, we have engaged with TechOn to help us with a piece of work. And we are expanding to the Southeast Asian market, the US markets, and more across the Australian space with both avenues, with our product and our services. So we have taken a little bit of a bilateral approach on this one. And I just think they're horizontal growth, not vertical growth on both of this. Yep. And they're going to be in two different areas. So yeah, I think I hope that answers the question about my journey and where I've come from. So I do have a bit of a technical background, but that was, in the dark ages where people still using candles to light up their offices rather than.
Not that bad. Yeah, I come from that world too. I can remember when my dad used to have a 086 PC.
Wow.
I mean, I come from Commodore 64 days, so like that's where my journey started, and we were putting tapes in a tape player to play games. Horrible.
I remember that. I had to keep the transformer for the Commodore outside the window because it overheated too much.
That's right. Yeah, right. There you go. Like, but I think you're all kind of one of the more technical, non-technical people or founders that I know. Like, I come from the world of, I used to be able to build my own computers. I could never program.
Yes.
I studied C++ and all that stuff. But, funny some of the things you say, like I can feel some similarities in kind of the tech background anyway. And I feel like I've come full circle. Like I've worked through all these non-technical roles, and then finally I'm back in the tech world on the tech side, working with technical people, and still non-technical. So anyway, it's a funny journey that you mentioned.
Well, I do believe, just for anybody out there, I do believe that you don't have to be overly technical to work with technical people. And that was a big thing that started me on a side journey a couple of years ago, is really about helping technical people communicate with non-technical people, because I find that's quite a challenge for a lot of people.
I still do that kind of work, so I've done a few workshops on that.
Yes,
I've got a planned like CTO Ask Me Anything event coming up in Sydney. So I feel like that work never ends.
No, exactly.
But anyway, I digress. But I guess from my point of view, like one thing I hope that this conversation sparks is a catalyst to help other people, and particularly in Perth, think beyond the borders of Perth, because what you're doing, I think, is really inspiring and can show the potential of, like, it doesn't really matter where you're based. You have and especially after COVID, we have perfect opportunity now to kind of explore other regions. Like, we shouldn't just be limiting ourselves to our own city. And that's, I think, one thing I want to look at. And maybe let's start there. Like, what spawned you to think about, because you were in Sydney previously, right? And
correct.
You've moved back to Perth, but you've just come back from a big trip from the US and Singapore. So I guess my question is, like, what spawned you wanting to explore those areas beyond Perth, or what even spawned beyond Perth?
I mean, I think a lot of it comes back down to when I first arrived in Perth, there was an ethos that if your company was based in Perth, don't bother going over east because the eastern states won't even look at you. That seemed to be the language and the narrative that I heard a lot. When I lived in Sydney and we would go and I'd come over and do work in Perth, it was flipped. It was like, oh, you're East Coast. We don't care about you. You have too much ego or whatever it was. And I thought that's really strange. But as a small business starting out in Perth, unless you are in the mining space, it's pretty difficult to get a really good break in Perth. Let's be honest. Perth
Yep.
is a resource-based industry. You have to target mining or government. So the big players are mining or government. We don't really have massive areas in the financials, the insurances, the fintech, those sorts of spaces. Those are reserved for New South Wales, or rather Sydney and Melbourne.
Mm.
And I think that part of that limits you to what you can do, but also it kind of, you've got a lot of competition. So if you imagine that there's 5 or so major mining organizations here, just like there are 4 major banks. If you're not in with one of those, it can become quite difficult to get started.
Yeah.
When I started to explore other markets, the US and Southeast Asia, the US has a bigger appetite for taking a risk on smaller organizations. You just have to go into any of the news articles about Silicon Valley, and prior to COVID, they were throwing out hundreds of millions of dollars at whatever came out that had the word AI in it. And it was just unbelievable, the amount of money that was happening in those spaces. Where you yourself, we've been in Perth, we've spoken to various VCs here, and they're reluctant to give you $5 million. And you start to see the risk ratio here completely different. People are very much risk averse. And I don't know if that's an Australian thing or just a Perth based thing, but I found that it's a really risk averse area. And I mean, I kudos to the companies that hold these sorts of events where they bring companies in, and you can be one of 10 companies to, win a share of $2 million as an investment, which is 200,000 each, which at the end of the day, if you're doing a startup company and you're running, $200,000 might be 1 year's worth of operational costs. It's not insignificant, but it's not major. So when we started to look at the US, I started to think about what could we bring value to the US that would allow us to get a bigger stake into a market over there. Plus, you're also looking at a massive market. They've got mining, resources, farming. You've got loads of industrial manufacturing, maybe not so much manufacturing, but you've got a lot in the fintech space. You've got a lot in the financial space. You've got a lot in technology. There's a lot of moving parts there. It's a market that's 100 times bigger. But I will be honest, and I will say that it's a market that can be a lot harder to break into if you don't have an in already. And there are some very fortunate people that have done some work for companies here that have taken them to the US and gotten in. We were very fortunate. We worked with an organization in the US 2021, and I got on really well with the owners. And they actually they took us to the US in the hopes that we could start to advance their knowledge and their skill set with their clients to gain greater insight for their organizations. Wow. And so we are working with them to help them understand what that looks like.
Yeah.
And that's been our in. But by no means has that been a full open door, first cab off the rank, go get huge amounts of capital. It's still a hard slog, and the markets are very different. Just like how you deal with people based in Perth versus people based in Sydney, Victoria, or Queensland is very different. How you interact with them, how you do your sales pitch, how all of that works. And again, Singapore is very different. Malaysia is very different. Indonesia is very different. There are a lot of different ways to interact with people, and things move at very different paces in each sort of district, area, or state. Right. So you have to take that into consideration when you're looking to do this. Absolutely.
I just saw a post, I think it was yesterday, and I've just kind of dug it up again. It talks about like how many unicorns have appeared in the first half of 2025. And in the US alone, there was 52. In Canada, 6. In China, 7. In Japan and Australia, 0. And the reason why I say Japan is because I spent 8.5 years there. And know how risk averse it is. But when you talk about risk averse of Australia, it's not just limited or restricted to Perth. Like I think it's a pretty nationwide phenomenon, I would say. Of course, it depends. Like people in VC space are probably, a lot more used to taking on risk. But I would say, as a sweeping generalization, we still are more comfortable with, investing in property where there's guaranteed rental yields and a guaranteed capital like growth, as opposed to, the riskiest asset, which is like tech or startups. So yeah, no, what happens in Perth kind of is echoed on the East Coast too, I believe, to some degree. Um, but in saying that, so you took a trip. You want to talk a little bit about your trip to the US and
Sure.
Singapore and any
Yeah. So,
insights you want to share from that?
I mean, it was me and my ops manager at the time. We went
Hmm.
to New York. So, comfortably took the longest flight in the world, which I'm very happy to say. And it is only the longest flight in the world by a few hours.
Right.
And I think that's going to change shortly, depending on, I think it's Qantas who's trying to go from Sydney direct to London, which will then be the longest flight in the world.
Yep.
But we landed in New York. New York's great. It's changed a lot since I was last there. I was there 20 odd years ago, and it has changed a
Hmm.
lot. The market's very different there. Obviously, with what's happening, the whole industry has changed. One thing I did take away from it is that people are still open to listening and understanding what's going on, but get to the point quickly. Don't beat around the bush. Kind of get in. Say your pleasantries and say, right, we're here to do this.
Right.
This is what we want to do, and have clear outcomes and what's to happen next.
Yep.
But New York was the first stopping point. My favorite place from a business perspective was actually Boston. We went up to
Okay.
Boston and then Kansas. So Boston, very flat people. And what I mean by that is don't beat around the bush. Literally,
Yeah.
I walked into a networking event, met one of the guys that we had spoken to, and he says, "Hey Justin, how you doing? Great to see you. What are you doing about this, this, this?" Straight into business. Nothing personal, just straight, clear-cut business. This is
Yeah.
what I want. This is where we
Yeah.
are. How can you help
Yeah.
me get there? And that's what I found Boston was like. You meet organizations, you get in, you show them what you do, you show them the value that it can produce, and then you walk out of the meeting
Yeah.
with obviously clear next steps, and you just got to follow up on those next steps. If you can get that right, then I think you have a really good chance making it work in Boston.
Mm.
There is a lot of opportunity growing in that space. I think I mean, I can't speak too much about it. It was the first time in that side of the US that I'd been, and particularly on a business trip. It was my first real business trip. So the eye-opening fact was people are very direct, people are very upfront, and they tell you exactly where they are,
Okay.
which is very different to what I experienced here in WA. And it was very different to what I experienced in Kansas. So
Yeah.
Kansas was a great trip from that perspective because the people we meet are a lot softer on the outside. So when you meet with them, you've got to talk about lots of other things before you get to business. It's sort of where you are here. You
Right.
kind of have a cup of coffee, you're having a
Yeah.
chat.
Yeah.
If you know them, you ask about the wife or the husband, the kids, what's happening at schools, things like that. And then you slowly bring up the business side of things. That was my experience, and that's what we found. But across the board in the US, one thing I can say is entertainment is a big part of them doing business. Whereas maybe here, and maybe it's because I don't deal with $1 million industries in Australia, but when we're here, you're doing a cup of coffee and you're trying to get some business. When you're there,
Yeah.
you're doing a barbecue lunch, you're doing a dinner, you're doing drinks, and that's where it becomes really expensive, particularly for a small business coming from a country that the exchange rate isn't in our favor. When going to the US,
Yeah.
it does become a lot more expensive. But you start to
Right.
build up those relationships, you start to understand how people operate, and you've got to keep that touch point and keep that methodology going. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And what we found from that perspective is that you can start to build those relationships and then start to get an idea of what's really happening under the hood. And then you can start to have a look at how you can negotiate a contract with them. That was my clear take from that. You asked about Singapore. Singapore was very different. We weren't prepared. Let's put it that way. This was a fault of my own. We were not prepared for Singapore and the rigidness of how business is done, the professionalism that comes from it. If I was to go back to Singapore, I'd go back very differently. I wouldn't go back with the casual demeanor that I took with me, thinking it would work. It didn't work in that country. We met one or two people, never really got anything out of it. It was kind of we were completely off band. I was not prepared for that trip at all. Recently, I was in Malaysia 2 weeks ago. Much better engagement. I've been and done a lot of work in Malaysia through previous experiences, understood how they operate.
Mm-hmm.
We got a lot of good traction. And so, yeah, Malaysia was a much easier in than Singapore from that perspective.
I always found Malaysians to be quite friendly and pretty open and easy to communicate with. That's not to say Singaporeans aren't, but I don't know. They're just on another level of like it's quite more open and easier to communicate with upfront and deal with.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so as I said, I found Singapore. I was unprepared. We you can't rock up in a t-shirt and a hoodie. Let's put it that way. And like I can't say that that's how everybody operates, but at least the businesses that we were trying to engage with, I always wear a collared shirt. I tried to present, but we just weren't ready for that level of drive from them,
right.
And we missed that mark. But that's okay. That's a learning thing.
Yeah.
Malaysia is a little bit more relaxed, and I agree with you. I think they're a little bit more open. I found people would. So I attended a conference while I was there. I found that people were more interested coming up and having a conversation to understand more about Qmark Solutions and how we drive enterprise architecture at organizations, and how the product that we're delivering helps that organization speed up their adoption of enterprise architecture, rather than what I consider the old ivory tower approach, which is everybody must follow the rules, everybody must do this, nothing gets done until architecture approves it. There's no human element in it at the same time. And so that was one of the things that I found in Malaysia. It was a lot more friendly, a lot more open. People would come up and have conversations and just be happy to have a chat and understand a little bit more and be open to learning. And I'm talking about people who come from CTO roles at banks. We're just coming up and having a conversation. And there was, it's odd because the very first time I went to Malaysia, I always believed there was this hierarchy. And if you didn't have the right title on your business card, you couldn't speak to the right person. But sitting in this last room, we had people coming up and having conversations. And I thought, that's what it's all about. That's where we are.
That's interesting. Like, if you compare that to Australia, like, we're very much like, we hate being sold to, we're very much like referral driven or like warm introduction driven. And it's not to say that we're not open, but like, just, I feel like it's only a surface level thing. If you want to dig deeper, and I found that in Perth as well. Like, I really needed to try hard to build networks, to build trust, like to show them who I was. And because all they saw was like me, some boy from Sydney and Tokyo, big city boy, it doesn't belong in Perth. Like, what are you doing here? Go back to Sydney. It's always the kind of sense I got initially, and I felt way out of my depth. It took time, but like, you start to scratch the surface, you start to show up more and be consistent in what you do. You can gradually build a better kind of, I don't know, like reputation for yourself. Whereas, the American approach, like, It's funny, but they talk about it that way, but it's real in that sense. And time is
Oh,
money. Yeah,
sorry. I mean, absolutely. And you're a network god, man. I've seen you network. You do really well at it, and I can happily say that Perth is difficult to network in.
mm,
But personally, coming from another country, Australia is difficult to network.
yeah, right,
And that could just be a cultural difference. Look, I've been here now over a decade, so I've assimilated with the culture, so I'm a little bit better at it. But when
yeah,
I first arrived, it was really difficult to build
yeah.
up a network from that perspective. But when it's interesting, you talk about we Australians are referral based.
Not
That's
always, but
no, no,
like
no.
it's easier that way. Yeah.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I think that that's in any market. What I found in the US is almost if you don't have a referral, as in,
Mm,
and so we came from Australia, we're not US. So first
yep.
thing is we don't have a referral. We don't even get a shoe in. We don't get a
Exactly.
look. It's like,
Exactly.
nah, don't want to. And that was why I started with the point that we were very fortunate that we met a company in the US that I got on very well with the founders who were doing those introductions on our behalf.
Mm,
Because
I
I
see.
think without that, I wouldn't have even bothered. In all fairness, I don't think I would have bothered.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's good to know. I mean, Japan is the same. Like, Japan is very much like, relationship based. Like, if you don't know someone who knows someone, like, you'll never get anywhere. Um, so yeah, I know that
I'd
kind of,
imagine Japan would be a tough nut to crack. Really, I would love to go to the country, as you know, but I imagine it would be a tough nut to crack because language barriers, cultural barriers, looking after their own citizens before others,
mm,
like all of that. I think
mm.
it would be tough.
Yeah, it's very sector specific too. But yeah, like I guess we're getting off the point a bit. We can have that conversation after this.
Yes, sorry.
Um, no, that's all right. That's all right. I guess I want to talk a little bit more about so your experience then on a technical side of things. So we've talked a lot about, your obviously your aspirations for Beyond Perth, which is amazing. And I hope, some business owners can, get inspired or maybe learn a thing or two about that approach. But let's talk about kind of, I think we're revisiting your kind of experience, like exploring the technical side of things. And you say you're kind of technical, you're in my mind, technical, non-technical, whatever that means. But let's talk about, what was your first experience working with a developer or like first couple of experiences working with devs? What did that teach you about like communication and how to like
Yeah,
work with them better?
I think so. The very first dev that I hired was a sponsor hire from South Africa.
Okay.
So we had the cultural barrier eliminated because being both South African. I think the most difficult thing that I had to learn as someone who used to develop, as I said, 20 plus years ago,
Hmm.
versus how development's done today, but also versus a developer that is used to working in a big team at a larger company, potentially on a very small element of the project,
Hmm.
versus a startup developer that needs to work on everything. I think there is very, very big differences between those sorts of spaces.
Mm.
So let me start off. The developer that I hired had 15 years experience. Now in my mind, I'm like, fantastic. This is really good. We're going to get a
Yep.
lot of wealth, a lot of depth of knowledge. They came in, they understood the system. They were very good at development. They understood what needed to be done. But what they didn't have was the startup mentality. That they
Mm.
had to understand the smallest little pieces all the way to the end, the ability to understand the customer journey, look outside of their little box,
Right.
understand why we would be doing something without being told why to do something.
Mm.
And when we when we look at this, I do a retro on this. I look back and realize this person has 15 years experience, And half of that experience came from working with SAP as a developer. Now, when you're working at a company that deals with SAP development, so they didn't work for SAP, but they did SAP development.
Yep.
You're a very small cog in a massive machine. You're writing specific code to do specific things for a specific system. That is very different to getting someone to be creative to come out of it.
Right.
And that was a massive takeaway for me because there was no fault to that person. There was no fault to what they were doing. It was a fault of my own for not realizing that in the beginning. The second takeaway I took from a lot of this is, if I'm sitting back and I'm going, I have this vision. I want you guys to develop something. But I can't articulate that to the finest detail for that person to understand it. I don't get what I want. And that, I have to be honest, that was really difficult because I tried to draw whiteboard pictures. We did a lot of sessions. We did a lot of workshops together. And I still found that the point that I was trying to get wasn't hitting the mark. Now, this could be because they had 15 years experience and they thought that what they were doing was right. This could be they were belligerent. This could be they really didn't understand me. This could be I wasn't really good at explaining. Whatever it is, it's the ownership is on me to get that point across. Now take that person. Now we then hired almost a fresh out of school developer, a 21-year-old.
Right.
Just passed all exams, has a little bit of experience, built up a few websites, done some things like that. But the brain was open to learn different things. And so I would explain something and they would go, okay, cool. Do their thing and give me their interpretation of that.
Right.
And I'd be like,
right.
It's not 100%, but it's bloody close. And it was very good.
Right.
But they took the initiative to give it a go. And so we had one person with 15 years experience that was, let's call it stuck in their ways. And I had somebody else who had no experience, but really good at solving the problem. Right. Who'd come up with really clever ideas to work around something. And that's the big difference. And I have to be honest, that was a massive learning lesson because you've got someone with 15 years who costs a lot of money because they've got all this experience versus someone who's straight out of uni who's just like, yeah, let's just figure this stuff out. You know, jump onto Google, jump onto AI, jump onto this, leverage these tools. And that's not to say that the person with 15 years experience wasn't doing that, but it was just a very different way of doing it. And then the other big takeaway, being as you say, I'm a non-technical person. I don't understand what it takes to develop the code anymore. And I don't need to, but I need to understand enough to make sure that they are doing what is right. And that is a big shortcoming for anyone who I'd say is a non-technical person trying to develop a product. Is if you don't understand the code, that's one thing. But if your developers are developing something and you don't understand it and you go on blind faith, you can get caught out really, really fast. And that is a major roadblock and a major pitfall that you will have to come into. As a non-technical developer, the best thing you can do is get hold of somebody who understands it, whether you pay them a service fee to do a technical analysis on what's being done so that you can write it, get that done. That is going to be so valuable for you in the long run. The last thing I would say that I've had to learn, and again, I'll mention this, I am a lagger in this sort of space. I took on, I'm not a huge fan of using AI to do a lot of things. I use it very superficially. Help me understand this. Help me, I'll write something and then ask AI to convert it to the speech of a seventh grader type thing. Like I don't use it to the extent that people do. In Figma, Figma Make is the AI version of that. I stumbled upon this very late in life. And this I found was great because what this has done for me is I can now tell an AI version of Figma to generate me a wireframe that I can now give to a UX designer to say,
Yep.
I want something that does this, but with more human interaction. Can you help me? Rather than me trying to draw it on a whiteboard and do that, or rather than me trying to learn Balsamic, which is a wireframing tool, to do that, I just
Right.
type away into Figma AI and it does this thing. And no, it's not perfect. No, it doesn't come up anywhere near what I want.
Yeah.
But it comes up with a frame that's good enough for me to then give to a UX UI designer to say, I want this in my style guide to do this. And I can tell you right now, the biggest thing that I as a non-technical person for this, the AI has helped me translate that language a lot easier.
Mm.
That ability to explain why we have to do things the way we need to do it, even though I don't fully understand why. It's
Yep.
that has been the biggest takeaway. So my journey about having developers from the first time we've hired them and understanding where they are in their journey. One of the things that I would honestly say to anybody who's looking to hire a developer is get some previous work from them. If you have enough of understanding to create a little development tester that they can take a wireframe and develop it so that you can actually see if they can do what they say they can do. Those are the things that I would say are the things to start doing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just hire someone because they've got 15 years experience.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it sounds quite familiar. I love the idea because I guess I talk to a lot of non-technical founders about how can they fill that gap and get their idea to the next stage, and like things like Figma Make or Lovable or Replit or
Yep.
Kurt. There's so many tools out there now that can get them to like almost 0.05, not one, but like can get them almost there. And so
Yeah.
then, the gap that they needed to fill initially was everything. And that gap is slowly closing. So AI is doing some of the heavy lifting. And then now you only need a dev to kind of, or a designer to fill in like that smaller chunk. So AI has certainly like made leaps and bounds in helping to kind of close the technical gap. Yeah, so no, I like that
I,
example. That's really cool. Yeah.
I would almost say that, and this was actually a recommendation from one of your other gentlemen that you had on your podcast, if I can drop his name, which was Lee Goldsworth,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a veteran as well.
Yeah, he was fantastic. I had a chat to him, and it was interesting because where I see it now, at least from my vision, my perspective, if you want to start a business in some form of development, and you don't have a technical director or a CTO or somebody who is of that technical mind and you're of the business mind next to you, you always have that with an AI tool.
Yeah.
An AI tool can act as that CTO for the startup, as you said. You don't have to spend the $10,000 or whatever it is a week to have a technical director. You can do this with an AI tool. And I think from now, and I always hit back on this. I know I'm behind on the curve. Now that I've started to understand how I can leverage this, that's where I want to start to utilize this more. And what that does for me as a company owner, in my belief, is that I then can give ideas or give the instructions better so that the people who are helping me to do this understand it better and can deliver a better outcome, rather than everybody being frustrated because Justin doesn't know what the hell he wants.
Right.
In all honesty.
Well, but it gives you more confidence in your ability to kind of drive whatever direction it is as well, I believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's funny though, because someone from your experience, I said you're non-technical, but I said you're technical non-technical. Let's be clear. So you do obviously have a great understanding of like the overall architecture and how things work and working with devs. I'm curious though, I guess you've worked with offshore or like remote, in a kind of remote environment. Like,
Yeah,
how does that compare to face to face? And what did you do to try to overcome
sure.
any obstacles that you kind of faced?
I think I think the biggest challenge that you have, and I know people always want to work from home and they love this
Mm,
ideal. I get that. I'll never stop anybody. My company has an ethos that you can work from wherever you want as long as you get your job done.
yeah.
But I think the biggest thing that people miss is that coffee side chat. The ability to
Mm,
just tap your buddy on the shoulder and say, hey, let's go grab a quick coffee. Or, hey, I'm really stuck with this. Can you help me? Can you look over my shoulder? Can you just check this out? Whereas that personal human interaction is lost when you are not in an environment where you're with your peers.
yeah.
Now, when working offshore, obviously we can't have that. So I have 3 developers out in South Africa at the moment,
Hmm.
and I catch up with them every day on a daily stand up. And that is my less than 15 minutes with these guys.
Mm,
And I think that I lose a lot of who I am and who they are to just trying to get work done. You don't get to sit down and say, "Hey guys, what did you get up to on the weekend?" Or like, um,
right.
what sports you guys playing? Or you're in South Africa. How's the rugby? Did you guys have a braai? Did you do this? Like, you don't get that little bit of banter that happens in between. You can't make that little bit of fun. And I think no matter where you offshore your development, that's always going to happen. And I think for a small business, it's quite important to try and have that ability to almost be in the same room with people, to be able to have those discussions, to be able to find out what's happening at home. Are they stressed out? With those 15 minutes that I see the guys, I have no idea what's happening with them mentally.
Of course.
Um, and as a business owner, that's a very important thing for me to be aware of. Now, I'm very fortunate. I know the person who owns the organization in South Africa, and I check in with
Hmm.
him and I say, hey, just take them out for a cup of coffee. I'll pay for it. Just stick it on my invoice. I just want to know that the guys are okay, that they're being treated well, that if they work for me through you, they still adhere to what I would have if I had guys in my office. Now, whether or not that organization in South Africa does what I ask or doesn't, I can't control, because
Mm,
at the end of the day, they aren't my employees. And my factor would almost come into, similarly, if we engage for longer engagements with TechCon, it'd be very similar. It'd be like, hey, who's checking in on these guys? Are they happy? Do they have the right work environment? Are they fulfilled? Are they getting enjoyment out of what they do? Because I can't control that,
yeah.
and I think that is control is probably the wrong word for this, but I can't oversee it. I can't visualize it. And while you're a small company, those are the best times to have those conversations, because the minute you get 50, 20, 50, 100 strong, you lose that layer of connection, because then you've got
Yeah.
managers that are meant to do that, and you lose
Right.
that very close touch. So when I had the 2 developers in our Perth office, every morning we'd go grab a coffee. Every single morning, we just took 15 minutes. I'd buy everybody a coffee and we'd just have a chat. And we all had lunch together. It was very
Mm.
important for me that we had lunch together. And during lunch, the one rule was no work. I want to know how are the kids, how's the life, what are
Yeah.
you guys
Yeah.
doing on the weekend, what are you doing in the
Right.
evenings. They were, and they all wanted to do that. That was the time to get to know people. And so I think with this remote work, which is very beneficial for companies, but I think we do lack that human touch, to say. And I think it's a very important part of where we are. But we also have to allow people to work wherever they want. So
Yeah.
it's not something that's going to go away. So to overcome it, I just try and catch up with the people, and we'll do our stand up. But I always ask, hey, how's things going? Is everybody happy? And I have to take it on face value that what they tell me is the truth.
Yeah. Do you ever get back to South Africa? Because we do like once a year, we'll do like a trip to Nepal for our clients. It's a chance to, interact and, as you say, very important to get that time on the ground with the people that you work with. So like when people from Perth or wherever it is come to Nepal, they spend almost like 24 hours with each other or more. Like they meet their family, they get taken home, they get taken out. Like it's the full almost tour guide Sherpa experience. I don't know if that's maybe I should not use that word, but like it's like they look after, you almost get to see an inside view of their life when people come over there. And
I think
I've had the
that's
same
great.
experience. Yeah. So, but when you go back, do you go often back to South Africa or back home?
I
or
haven't been back
no?
to South Africa since 2015, and in
Okay.
all fairness, I have no desire to go back to South Africa. Not because I don't want to meet the people that are there. There's just there has to be a bigger reason for me to go over. We've got those three people. I would rather say to them, come over here. I'll pay for them to come here. Go and spend 2 weeks here.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Let's move on to kind of like talking about Qmark and where to from here. So obviously you've done your trip abroad, you're now back home and kind of what is it, like refining the product? Is that the best words to use?
So I think we took some major lessons from what the clientele is looking for over in the US and Malaysia and Singapore. The big thing that is out of it is that architecture can't be done slowly anymore. The movement and the way the world of technology is going, it's got to be done a lot quicker. We also got to look at one of our competitors' products in depth and seeing what they are doing, and they recently acquired 2 other architectural companies, which makes them the largest tool in the world. And understanding what they're doing, we have to get there a lot quicker. But what we're trying to do from that perspective, without giving too much away right now, is that we are trying to improve the adoption of architecture as quick as people are adopting AI, so to speak.
Sure.
So really trying to minimize what it takes to understand where the company's technology stack lives and what changes need to be done from that perspective. And I think so some of those big things come into play is where you aren't. In the past, I would almost say that architecture was done to help a company understand what changes are coming into the organization. Where AI and everybody's trying to use it is trying to predict prior to a change needed to be done, what needs to be done in order to streamline this. And everybody is using AI to replace workforce, which seems to be a very common thing. We don't necessarily want to do that, but we want to adhere to helping the company hit its business goals quicker, cheaper, and faster, but using AI in that space as well.
Sure. And so once you've been able to, build the next version, what's the plan? You go back to US, Singapore, or any other markets, like any other planned trips to kind of revisit or continue?
I think the big key thing is we going to target our local clients here in Perth first. Malaysia or Southeast Asia is a lot cheaper to get to than the US. It's also a lot closer. So we'll start building on that with the leapfrog to still hit the US. So we've got our clients out in the US that we are delivering phase 1 to, and that's what we want to start utilizing to break into that ground. My new product manager is German, and they want to go back to Germany next year for a vacation with his whole family. And he is now saying he wants to take the product to Germany when he goes. So organically grow into the European market, but not planned.
Sure.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's cool. And I guess one thing, if you have any word of advice for like a business owner in Perth, they're kind of stuck in the market or they're curious about exploring. Do you have any words of wisdom or thoughts to share with people, that are thinking about going beyond the Aussie borders?
Do your market research. So understand what the market actually requires before you go into expanding larger. Have some sort of proof that your product or your idea significantly works in your local market before going out. I think it's just common business knowledge. I would almost say that I will tell you what I was told before I went to the US. And and this piece of advice will haunt me forever. The US is a bigger market, yes, but whatever time frame you think it will be, and whatever cost number you have in your mind, double or triple it, because it will take you longer and cost you more to break into that market than you actually think. If your budget's 100 grand, it's 300 grand. If your time frame's a year, it's 3 years. It is going to take you time and effort to get into that. And if you're in Perth, like we are, or like I am rather, you'll be working stupid hours. You'll be up at 10 o'clock at night or 4 o'clock in the morning doing meetings. And I can happily tell you, I have done those meetings. And it will wear you out. So be prepared.
Okay.
That advice was given to me, and I took it on the chin, and I can honestly say that person was right. I've been doing meetings at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, 3 o'clock in the morning. Like it is a tough gig.
That almost also applies to software estimates. Any estimate you give it, times it by 2 or 3, and that's probably the more accurate. No, I shouldn't be saying that. I work in software. But yeah, no, I totally get it, because what you think might be only this amount of work probably actually takes this amount of work. I seriously thought when I came back to Perth from Japan that it wouldn't take long for me to build a relationship with Aussies. I speak English. They speak English. Like, it can't be that hard. I was so wrong. so wrong. Yeah, so it makes total sense to me. Yeah. So look, I appreciate your time. Lots of valuable lessons there about, not just exploring beyond Australia's borders, but like working with devs and like, just generally good conversation and good advice for people out there that want to think about moving beyond Perth and, taking their business elsewhere, whether it's East Coast, where I am. Hey, I'm in Sydney. Come talk to me if you're interested in coming here. Or, if you're looking at beyond Australia's borders, there's so much potential opportunity as well, I would say. And not only, everyone says the US or the UK, but we have so many countries in our time zone that could be potential good markets as well. So don't ignore that fact either, I would say.
I would agree with you 100%. The Southeast Asian market is growing rapidly, and it is most definitely a market to focus on, depending on your niche, depending on what you do. It is a growing market. Singapore, from a logistics perspective, is huge. From a central hub of Asia, is massive. Malaysia is growing. The statistics that I was listening to while I was in Malaysia, I'm not very good at statistics. I'm not going to rattle them off, but I can tell you that the Malaysian king has some grand ideas of how to grow Malaysia's technology, data, become sort of the sovereignty for Singapore's data infrastructure, because
Oh,
Singapore
okay.
has no space, no land
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Malaysia does, and they border each other, and they
Right.
have they share values. There is talks of a train being built between KL and Singapore. Now, when
Yeah.
you look at that, like it's a 45-minute flight, so a train might be 2 hours, or if they
Mm.
build the bullet train like in Japan, who knows?
Yeah.
But the point is, don't if you're in Australia, particularly in Perth, where you're on the same time zone, where you can talk to people at the same time, don't ignore the Southeast Asian market. Realistically, look at that market. It is a growing market, and it is a lot easier to get to and deal with than the US and Europe any given
Yeah.
Sunday.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate everything you've shared, and yeah, look forward to working closely together in at TechOn too.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's been a pleasure.
No worries. Yep. All right. Thanks, Justin.
Cheers.